Hello, I'd like to officially welcome you all to today's webinar, Designing and Leading Virtual Meetings. My name is Chris Hawks. I'm a training specialist for AmeriCorps VISTA and a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I'll be your host for today's webinar, and you also see my colleague Khadija Carr and our webinar support team, LSI, monitoring the chat and Q&A throughout the presentation. Leading our presentation today is Ryan Hoffman, Principal and Founding Partner of Staircase Strategy. Staircase Strategy is a design and management consulting firm whose founders have over a decade of experience leading and supporting 100% remote teams in industries ranging from blockchain to construction and local government as well. Their remote facilitation design practice supports and energizes teams that are exploring the world of remote collaboration. From meetings and workshops to offsites and conferences, Ryan and her team have facilitated and led over 300 impactful remote sessions. Also joining us is Josh Levette, who is an AmeriCorps VISTA that we're happy to have on the webinar today. He's joining us from Indiana. Josh will soon be completing his term of service with Ascend Indiana, where he focuses on workforce development initiatives to create economic opportunity across the state of Indiana. And we'll have the pleasure of hearing from some of Josh's experiences in just a bit later on in the webinar. And here you see the objectives. So with so many VISTAs shifting from in-person operations to remote service, it's likely many of you have been participating in virtual meetings, either as a participant or as a facilitator. You may have observed there are some unique benefits and challenges to leading remote meetings. In today's session, we will offer some best practices for how to design meetings that maximize the benefits of a virtual environment, and we'll consider ways you can build your skills as a virtual facilitator. Our objectives, as you see on the screen, are that you will come away from this session being able to define the purpose of a meeting you are planning, design a remote meeting agenda with an emphasis on participant collaboration and interaction, and develop or strengthen your virtual facilitation practice. In addition to the objectives, we have our just a quick look at the agenda. We're going to go over some strategies for designing and leading virtual meetings that Ryan will lead us through. And Josh will also offer some VISTA firsthand experience notes. And we'll also, towards the end, have a remote meeting demo, which I'm really looking forward to. And we'll finish this up with a Q&A. So again, post your questions to the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You can click that button. If you type them into the chat, we'll try to notice them, but sometimes the chat can go really fast, so we miss them. So please use that Q&A button at the bottom. So I will pass this on to Ryan to start us off.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much to the AmeriCorps VISTA team and LSI for making all of this happen. So I'd like to start by thinking back before 2020 and thinking about those of us who chose to work remotely before then, at a time when we could move freely between our home offices and our communities, and note that we did so with immense privilege. I am one of these people, and this past spring, a new work from home population has erupted in the abrupt switch to 100% virtual jobs and 100% at-home families. And I want to note that I was able to learn about virtual human exchange and hacking technology to enhance collaboration when it was an exciting choice. I had the space for curiosity, constructive failures, and I had the mandate to learn and document and try again. Failing through the frustrations of remote meetings was exactly the point. And there's a lot that can be lost in the digisphere to really dehumanizing effect. From Psychology Today of this year in June, there is an article that says that in our digital lives, it's easier to turn away. But each time we do, we lose our capacity for empathy. And so it takes tips and tricks to really game technology into working for and not against our collaborative natures. And there are even aspects of remote environments that outperform in-person sessions, like ease of documentation. But it does really take thoughtful design to create meaningful digital experiences. And I want to talk about some of the strategies for that: thoughtful meeting design, things like purpose for your meetings. And I hope that you can leverage my years of experience as we are fundamentally changing the way we work with ourselves, with others, and with the world. So the three big topics we're going to cover today, you can see on the slide: framing your meeting, developing your facilitation practice, and using a facilitation blueprint. And we are going to start about how and why to frame your meeting and why it's the foundational step in creating successful remote meetings. So what is framing your meeting? So it's really setting the stage for every decision you make in your meeting's planning and execution. Framing your meeting allows you to make good decisions on who to include at the meeting, what to include in the agenda. And it includes three main parts. So understanding participant needs, defining outcomes, and articulating assumptions. And so under those three main categories, we have understanding people. Who are the participants? What are their needs, motivations, and goals? Defining outcomes. Are these outcomes specific enough, and are they actionable? And then finally, articulating some assumptions. So what must be true in order for this session to be successful? So let's explore this a little deeper through an example. So in this example, who are the participants? It's a small, scrappy team of 8 employees at the company for a long time, but they're very new to social media and they use it rarely in their personal life. What are their needs, motivations, and goals? So this team, they need to improve their social media skills after years of resisting it. And they've really limited themselves in the past to blogging and LinkedIn. And in improving those skills, they really want to learn ways to engage new technology and audiences with compelling storytelling. And they want to do this in order to feel confident in time for their fall campaign. So you gain this information through surveys, through interviews, or even through your anecdotal experiences with a particular group. Many of you have worked with groups for a while. And you'll notice that these are pretty detailed descriptions. They use feelings words and adverbs. It gives us a rich sense of who the participants are as people. And the more you understand your participants, the more you'll be able to predict what their experience of your meeting will be, and thus design a better meeting for them. So defining your outcomes. So are they specific enough and actionable? So just to give you an example here. So a general version of this would be they want to learn more about social media. Kind of vague, difficult to make decisions on your agenda. What kind of learning? What kinds of activities should we do? What content? Versus something that's more specific and actionable. To learn and apply techniques for engaging audiences in new ways. To establish a creative practice around crafting inspiring content on social media. So this gives you a direction for what kinds of lessons you might teach, what kinds of activities you might do, what kinds of discussions you might want to have. And this is another decision-making tool. Defining the outcomes of your meeting and making sure that they're specific and actionable makes it much easier to decide what and what should not be on the agenda. And finally, articulating assumptions. So this means thinking through what has to happen in order for participants to reach their desired outcomes. Most assumptions tend to fall into the human and tech categories, but there might be others related to organizational needs and anything else you might think of. In this example, some of the human assumptions are, all right, so in order for this training on social media to be successful, team members will be present and participating throughout the training session. They'll have time and support to complete agreed upon homework or pre-work or any other thing that we decide we need to do. And then from a tech perspective, it needs to be true that they have reliable internet connections. And let's say the tool we're using for this meeting is Google Slides, so they have to be able to actually access Google Slides. Articulating assumptions allows you to set expectations with the participants around expected behaviors. And when you're debriefing after the session, it allows you to have some insight into where your assumptions fell short, how that impacted your meeting design, and what you might do differently next time. So those are the 3 stages of framing your meeting, and we have it all on one lovely slide here for your reference in the future. And next, I want to talk a little bit about developing your facilitation practice. So once you have decided, okay, this meeting has good outcomes, I've framed it properly, and I think it might need a facilitator. Thinking about facilitation as a critical skill for anyone who works with other people and a way to make your meetings more effective is really helpful in virtual environments in particular, where people tend to struggle in this new dynamic. And there's really some foundational behaviors of facilitation, whether you're remote or in person. You have some of the basics, establishing agendas, keeping time, setting ground rules around behavior and technology, and giving clear instructions for any activities that you might be doing. There's things that fall into a more intermediate category, keeping people on task, democratizing participation, making sure that one voice isn't heard the whole time, and summarizing points. And then you get to things that are a little more advanced, like adapting agendas on the fly, modeling healthy feedback practices, and managing power dynamics and power struggles in a group. And these are difficult enough on their own once you get to these advanced places. And then in remote, you have the added complexities of distance collaboration. These fall under two categories, human and technical. So under the human, there's things like absence of physiological connection. So the things that happen to our bodies, our heart rate sync, what eye contact does to feeling calm, those are physiological connections. And then the absence of visual cues, like being able to read the energy of a room. And then things in the technical category, you're facing access to technology, the ability to learn new softwares, which we'll call technical literacy today, and then the thankless labor of managing technology and the inevitable difficulties that come with it. And this is a special shout out to the LSI team today, Steve and Jeff. Thank you so much for managing our technology today. And so focusing a bit in on these human remote considerations, so physiological connections. When in person, humans use touch, eye contact, our ability to match heart rates as a way to build trust and empathy. And not having those physiological connections makes collaboration significantly harder. Additionally, and then some things you can think about here as what will help with collaboration and trust. If you use visual activities, people get a much richer sense of each other, which allows them to empathize. So for example, maybe there is an introductory activity where people post photos of themselves or of things they like. And this adds depth to how we perceive and relate to people. And another thing you can try are rituals. So rituals are when people move in the same way, they reinforce feelings of connection. So many of us are familiar with rituals, anything from high fives to thumbs up to things that we do around religious activities or in groups where we have similar behaviors over and over again together. Just the sheer act of doing these things together at the same time tricks our brain into feeling more connected with whoever is doing it with us. So I'd encourage you to play around with things like hand gestures, maybe giving a toast and having everybody take a sip of their, water or beverage at the same time, and maybe phrases that everybody says at the same time to help them feel more connected. One team I work with all bought the same tea, and they start off their important meetings by sipping their cups at the same time. Another team I work with sent each team members these pretty funny 80s styled headbands that they'll all put on and wear during celebratory meetings. And this ability to create bridges between physical and virtual spaces through rituals and visual activities allows for a lot of creativity. So you can really get playful with trying to overcome this the lack of physiological connection. And so when interacting online, we can often catch facial expressions virtually, but we miss really important signals about how people are feeling, like hand gesture and posture. Not to mention the limitations of video conference, like small screens and delays, makes it really hard to see the visual cues that we do have. And here, your role as a facilitator is critical in overcoming this challenge. Two things that you can do is around increasing verbal cues, so using facilitator narration and using group norms. So you can increase verbal cues to compensate for this lack of visual cues. It can be pretty easy. Most people realize this, and just including a phrase like, so there's a silence. It seems like Mia or whoever is thinking quietly for a minute. We'll come back to her unless she communicates otherwise. Or perhaps you say something like, we're waiting for Dara's laptop to bring up the slides. Your speaking here can act as a narration to the story of your session, and it fills the gaps for the participants. And so using group norms to simply acknowledge the limitations and request things like, could you err on the side of over communicating today, or asking participants to raise their hand if they just want to speak. And then again, this facilitator narration. So it can act as the translation of awkward silences, and it fills in the gaps for participants and compensates for the lack of visual cues. Now on to technical remote considerations. So when planning your remote session, understanding your participants' access to software and high-speed internet will determine if they can participate or not. Learning technology is another barrier that can make or break their experience. So 2 tips here are: 1, using online tools that meet the lowest level of access. And so this might mean everyone uses one simple tool like Google Slides or even email, or you create different ways to participate in activity through multiple tools, but just making sure that everybody can, at a minimum, access them. And then from a learning new tools perspective, sometimes people might have to learn new tools in order for collaboration to be really effective or to level it up. And if you use icebreakers or any sort of get to know you activity or connection activity in order to use those new tools and to practice them, it's a really effective low stakes way to onboard and practice any new technology. And then it has the added benefit of breeding connection. And so this also applies to skills. So if you have a team that's a whiz with Google Slides, they can use comments, create crazy shapes, images, wonderful. But if one person doesn't know how to use it and you design an activity that requires their skill level to be higher than it is, it brings the experience of the group down and it prohibits the full participation of that member, ultimately excluding important perspectives from the work. And you can think too that you can build up tools and skills over time. So instead of maybe a 3-hour meeting, maybe you have 3 one-hour meetings and teach one new technology skill at the beginning of each of those meetings so that the participants will then be able to use them for the meetings. And using these icebreakers and connection activities to teach new technology, Google Slides, digital whiteboards, it allows people to fail in a really safe way that doesn't make them feel like they're bad at their work. And so finally, talking about difficulties in management. So remote technology, as we all know, creates ample opportunities to engage your audience in new and creative ways, but it is a skill to manage multiple softwares. And there are many, many, many places where technical difficulties can disrupt or completely derail a session, which I have lived countless times. And so after many technological difficulties, these 2 tips are gold and have saved my butt many times. So the first one is have a contingency plan. The one time you don't have it is the time you need it. It allows you to calmly support your participants in any tech transition while still reaching the desired outcomes for the session. And we even have a contingency plan for today, which we will show you a little bit later. And finally, just using transparency and humor in the face of any technical difficulty. You really can get through almost any technical difficulty through providing clarity on what's actually happening. Oh, it seems like we're struggling with so-and-so, and a bit of levity to the most infuriating part of remote life. So exploring the world of remote collaboration technology platforms is a bit of a jungle, but here are some to start. Whatever your industry is, it's likely you'll need 3 categories of tools for your remote meetings: live discussion, deliverable creation, and focused collaboration. So live discussion, we can describe as deliberating and debating in real time. And live deliverable creation is things like working on documents, presentations, and other deliverables together at the same time. And live focused collaboration can be described as thinking through complex challenges and solutions. And this usually involves visual thinking of some sort. And so any of the options here that are underlined have really robust free options. Google Drive and Google Meets and Concept Board is a really good place to start. Google Drive for your live document creation, Google Meets for your live discussion, and Concept Board as your live focused collaboration, which is essentially a digital whiteboard, a place where you can put Post-its and different shapes and even draw. My favorite right now is Zoom, Google Drive, and Mural, but please feel free to play around with all of these tools by yourself. Identify what your team is used to using, propose the tool that best fits your habits. But if your org doesn't have the budget, it's worth building new habits with new but similar tools to start building your remote meeting culture. And here's a quick cheat sheet you can use whenever you're going to be facilitating or leading a remote meeting. These are well-tested guidelines you can use to facilitate a better remote experience for your participants. 20% tech buffer time in whatever activity it is that you're doing throughout the course of the meeting. Making sure you have an activity for tech onboarding to new tools for people. Verbal communication and tech guidelines. How am I supposed to speak today? What are any technical specifications that you want me to do or use? When should I use the chat? So on and so forth. Making sure that there is always a moment for human connection, particularly if you're doing work in complex problem spaces. The more trust people have, the better they'll work through complex and tough stuff. And always have a contingency plan. The ever important contingency plan. And now I'd like to turn it over to Josh so he can share his experience.
Thanks, Ryan. Is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. Just wanted to say hi quickly to the folks out in Indiana, and I went to school in DC, so saw a few folks there as well. Just wanted to thank everyone for having me on. I'll just kind of go through a little bit of my experience and also kind of weave in through what Ryan was talking about. I've had a great opportunity to really participate in both a lot of internal team meetings and external client meetings. So at Ascend, we're still quite a new organization and a very collaborative team, and a team that's really working to come up with a lot of new processes, and we're still figuring a lot of things out. So very, very often I am, on a call with some teammates. We're going through some new ideas, some new processes, kind of ways to really make our organization tick better. And then also, as kind of in my role as a business development coordinator, where I'm working with employer partners to really get candidates connected to job opportunities, I'm doing a lot of external facing meetings as well, and working to link with various partners across the state to make those connections. And one thing I will say is that while there are some very detrimental sides to virtual meeting, and in terms of those not having those connections, it can also be somewhat more efficient as well, especially if you are working statewide, and really being able to just kind of hop over to the laptop instead of having to drive up several hours. And so I think that there are definitely some bright sides to that. And I definitely encourage everyone to sort of see how they can make that efficient as well. So I've run the gamut on a lot of the various platforms that we've used. I've gone through GoToMeeting first, and then Microsoft Teams and Zoom, and kind of figuring them all out. And I think really as an organization, we ended up for a lot of our internal and external meetings going with Microsoft Teams, simply for the fact that that is a platform and an application that is available to Microsoft-based offices. And so that I think is oftentimes an easy lift as well. But I think Zoom also, especially for webinars and activities like this, can be a bit better for a lot of the focus groups, kind of breakout rooms. If you're doing a large organizational wide meeting where there are going to be the Q&A sessions, or there are going to be parts and various hosts and such, I think that is where Zoom can really come in, and that is helpful as well. So for me, I think one important thing I wanted to address as well is a lot of those gaps that we discovered. I think sometimes you don't know kind of what you're missing or what a lot of the gaps are until you find them. And so, once again, with us being a very collaborative team, we really had to figure out how to adjust. In our office, I kind of had the privilege of having half my year in the office, half the year out of the office. So I'm kind of very balanced in both sides. And it used to be we could just kind of, scoot our chair over to the person we needed and, talk, cover things, get on the same page. And now it's really, okay, how do we get this question answered in a way that, we're not interrupting somebody else's schedule? And so it's really about making sure you have to communicate. You have to say, hey, is there a time for us to hop on a quick call? Or, is there time for you to just kind of walk me through this real quick? What's your schedule looking like for the rest of the week? Another thing we did, especially as we're onboarding a lot of new VISTAs coming in and a lot of other folks in our organization as they grow, is we've worked to create a lot of process memos and a lot of memos around like standard operating procedures, so that we're able to clarify and able to provide a little bit more clarity on day to day, and to say, hey, look, well, here's how this has been done in the past. Here's kind of our structure and our system of going about this. Take a look at this first, and then if you have any questions, feel free to follow up. One big thing, of course, is always going to be poor connectivity. If there's something going on, if you're in an apartment or even at home and everyone is working from home, sometimes the Wi-Fi can get a little busy, and so it's really about making sure that you have those contingency plans, as Ryan mentioned, making sure you're able to call in if needed, or if you have an opportunity to move where there's a better connection. And also, of course, there are going to be those distractions at home. If you have pets, if you have kids, whatever it might be, and just being flexible and adaptable to that as well. Knowing that, I've got 3 dogs at home and they often bark on a call, and you kind of just laugh it off and have that humor. And then lastly, I just wanted to go through a few of the tips I found that I think could be useful to many of you. Virtual meetings, even though they can be efficient, can also be draining without that human aspect, and can often feel like they take a bit of effort. You have to set something up, you have to send out the invite, you have to get everything ready, and so make sure you moderate accordingly. I kind of go with the message email meeting rule. What can just go into Slack? What can go into like a chat or something else? What can you solve via via an email? And then really, what needs to be a meeting? Like, what do you need to actually kind of walk through, share screens for, and take some time with? Another thing that Ryan mentioned with a lot of the cues as well is, I think in person, you're able to get away with a lot of those implied languages, implied visual cues, and that's not really as possible here. You do have to be clear, you have to be precise, so that you're making sure that people know what you're saying, and that there isn't any room for misunderstanding, and making sure that you provide that outline or that agenda, because again, I think it's really about making sure everyone's on task. You're kind of avoiding that Zoom burnout. You get through what you need to get through, and you move on as well. And making sure you define those roles. So saying, okay, I'm going to be here. I'm kind of in the driver's seat, facilitating this. My colleague is going to hop in for a demo at some point. And for me, I think it's very important to use your camera when possible. I think that really kind of just adds a sense of, humanity. You're able to see folks, make that connection, although knowing as well that sometimes cameras can slow down a connection. So when possible, but that is definitely a big help. Those are kind of the tips I have. I think we'll get through a little bit more as we go through the Q&A portion later. So I'll hand it back over to Ryan.
Thank you. So I want to ask the group if you can tell us, what are some of your favorite remote meeting tips? What strategies have you found successful?
And when entering your responses, just a quick reminder, it looks like most have already done it, but just to toggle that to all panelists and attendees. That way, everyone on the webinar can view the responses, and you can all share the knowledge with all other VISTAs across the country. So seeing some answers come in, it's coming fast now. Icebreakers, icebreakers, icebreakers. Do you see any, Ryan, that's
I know, this is amazing.
particularly stand out? Yeah, I know it's tough when it goes this fast.
I'm seeing lots of icebreakers, which I'm reading into human connection, transparency, and humor. Agendas. Like I'm just loving the agenda love in this group. You'd be shocked at how many people do not have agendas. Yeah, preparing.
Images that, yeah, pictures worth 1,000 words. Use images to relay information. Definitely. It's a great tip.
Yeah, and I've seen quite a couple of this idea of over planning, which I myself am a diligent over planner, but I would argue that over planning in a remote environment is actually just normal planning, because you do have to plan more.
Yeah.
Yeah, pre-agenda, plans A and B. These
Always remember to mute. Yes. As many times as that could be said, remember to mute when you're not speaking and unmute when you are speaking. You know,
conversations with no one.
It seems so easy, but it continually happens in almost every meeting.
Wear pants. Thanks, Rosemary. Oh, man.
Patience with technical difficulties. Wow. Yeah. These are coming in fast. Flexible. Definitely flexibility. No eating. Yeah, you don't want to hear wrappers crinkling if you have some plastic, or definitely don't want to hear anyone with a mouthful. Yeah.
Dedicated sharing time.
Yeah, keep these coming. We'll give it another few seconds, make sure everyone gets a chance to put their answers in, and for those, you know, kind of reviewing the answers, you get a chance to kind of scroll up and read through as well, because there's some good tips here. Record your meeting.
Yeah. Oh goodness, there's a whole other class I teach on documentation and access and digital hygiene through design stuff. And to me, one of the major plus sides of remote is it is so much easier to document, which means it's easier to know what work you did and access it.
Yeah. Great. Well, I would say keep the responses coming, and by all means, review responses from your colleagues out.
Man, these are great. You guys are awesome.
Still there, Ryan? Don't know if the audio difficulties. Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll go on to the next slide on this.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. That was so awesome. And I certainly learned quite a bit from everyone. Appreciate your humor. All right. So in our last section, I want to introduce you to a tool that I created that I find really helpful in designing really important meetings. So meetings that have a big impact on my clients or my team or my career. And it's called a facilitation blueprint. And essentially, it's a diagram you can use to map out your participants' experience over time, from the moment that they learn about your session, which is when their experience starts, through the completion of their action items from the session, which in theory is where their experience ends. So it's much easier to see a facilitation blueprint than to hear it described. And so here is a skeleton. This is what you might start with. There are some basic parts, and then you fill the rest in. So up top here, we have the timeline. So there is prep. Let's see, Steve, could you? Yeah, awesome, thank you. So there has prep. Let's say there are 2 meetings in your session. So there's meeting 1, there is intersession or work that happens in between, and meeting 2. Then we have the experience layers. So what is your participant action? What tool or process are they using in order to go through with that action? What is the facilitation action or the facilitator action? And then what is the support action? Which brings me to this final note here, which is this line of visibility. And so that line demarcates between what the participants see in the session and the work that's done behind the scenes. So let's see a blueprint in action. So first we're going to look just at the prep stage. Oh, I love these fancy animations. Thanks, guys. All right, so in the background, the facilitation team are going to be working here on the support actions and then the facilitator actions. But I want to start up top with the participants. So as you're thinking through, what is the first thing that my participant is going to do in their meeting experience? So the first thing you're going to do is they're going to actually accept a meeting invite that I, as the facilitator or organizer, sends them. The tool they're going to use is they'll receive it via their calendar or via email. The facilitator action is going to be to send that invitation to the participant, and then the support action down at the bottom is preparing those links for pre-work or whatever else might be in the calendar invite that needs to be prepared. The next participant action, if there is session prep, is going to be to actually do that session prep. The tool or process is perhaps you've sent links in an email to them. The facilitator action is to actually send the pre-work out to the participants. And then the support action is to, write the copy or the content for that email or for the pre-work. Yeah, so now we'll take a closer look at the meeting part of the blueprint. All right, so the start of the meeting, the very first participant action is going to be sign on to the Zoom call. What will they use? They'll use Zoom. The facilitator action there is most likely just some tech support. Maybe they'll say welcome. And then with the support action, you're ready in the background with the call-in number or with anything else that you might need to quickly do to help participants sign onto the call. Let's pretend that the tool we're using here is Google Slides. That's going to be where we have our main work. So the participants have to actually get into Google Slides. The tool and process there is that they use the Zoom chat in order to click into a link to get into Google Slides. Facilitator action is post the link in the chat. Support action is you have to actually design the Google Slides and have the link ready. And we'll continue doing the same thing as we move along, right? You have the icebreaker, the tool is your Google Slides, maybe you'll have them turn to the slide number, right, and prep. Then perhaps there's a presentation. Then the participants give comments on the presentation. And then at the end of every session, you're going to have something similar to next steps, and then some sort of feedback. And the tool here is perhaps it's a feedback survey. The facilitator action is post feedback link in the chat. And then the support action here is create the feedback survey. And I have the link ready to post in the chat before everyone leaves. And so we're going to show you an example of what a meeting like this would actually look like. So I am going to share my screen and I'm going to say thank you in advance to my two actors. All right, here we go. Okay. All right, Khadijah and Josh, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay, wonderful. So as mentioned earlier in this webinar, it might be appropriate to use more than one platform when designing your meetings. So in this demo, we're going to use Google Slides to support our live focused collaboration and discussion. And I chose Google Slides because it's simple, it's free, and it's really easy to use to run your remote meetings. And I want to set the stage here for this demo. So referring back to our earlier social media training example, let's pretend that I have been charged with creating a training for our social media team, referenced earlier, and I need to get input from the team on that agenda. To make the best of our live time together, I already shared the training agenda as pre-work, and I asked that the team give me written feedback. And so this session is really specifically for aligning on what changes should be made to the training. And we'll pretend the training is tomorrow, so very short timeline. And there isn't time to incorporate all the feedback. So I want to get a sense of which feedback we should prioritize. All right, and action. Okay. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to our meeting to review the social media training agenda. I believe we're just waiting for Khadijah to get their headphones in. Are you here?
I am here.
Okay, wonderful. So everyone is here, so we can get started because I already talked to Josh. So please move to slide 2 and tell me when you're there.
I am there.
I am also there.
Wonderful, thank you. So I want to start by reviewing our objective. So our objective today is to prioritize feedback on the training agenda so that Ryan, me, can make changes in time for our training session tomorrow. We have a very short session today, so we're going to be really focused on this specific collaborative goal. Next, I'd like to review the agenda. We're going to review the agenda and group norms happening right now. We're going to connect as people. We're going to prioritize the feedback that you gave me in your pre-work. Thank you so much for doing that. Then we're going to establish next steps, and then you'll give me some feedback on the facilitation and design of the session. Any questions or comments before we dive into the connection activity?
Nope, let's get started.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Thanks for putting this together, Ryan.
Oh, of course, Josh. Yeah, great. All right, so can everybody please move to slide 3 and let me know when you're there?
I'm there.
I'm also there.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'd like to discuss some ground rules that will help us collaborate and use technology well today. So on the human side, please err on the side of over communicating. We do not have those visual cues. So if there's a silence, we don't know what's happening. So just a reminder to do that. Today, again, we are going to be aligning, not necessarily agreeing on an order of what feedback should come in. So as long as we have general alignment of like, yeah, we think these general things are most important, that's perfect. And please honor the time limits today. We have such limited time and I want to make good use of it for you and our team. Then on the technology side, please use Zoom chat for any technical difficulties. I know that there is a chat in the Google Slides, but have any technical difficulty stuff in the Zoom chat, I'll be on the lookout for it, and this means I won't miss it. Secondly, as always with technology, please be patient, generous, and supportive of each other as we work through our technical difficulties. And finally, please have your videos on and unmute for any discussions that we have. All other work, videos off, mute to your heart's content, but just so that we can really see each other and have good discussion for that moment, I'd appreciate it. Are there any additional rules that anyone would like to add? Maybe something about having fun or?
Yeah, I'd like to add a rule. I do think that it would be great if we could all bring our humor and have fun for this. I feel like as a group, we have a tendency to be more on the serious side.
Mm-hmm.
So just a reminder that we actually like each other and the work is always better if we add a little humor.
Oh, I love it. So how about bring your humor and have fun?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Khadijah. Okay, so if there's nothing else, let's move on to slide 4. Please let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
I'm there.
Great. Okay, so before we dive into the work, let's just take a moment to connect as humans so that we can lay the groundwork for a productive communication during our session and deepen our relationships a little bit. So in the Post-its that are pre-populated here in the white space below the instructions, could you please type one word that describes how you're feeling today? You'll have about 30 seconds, and to type, you double click inside the box and just start typing. Okay, awesome. So now Josh, can you tell us a bit more about the word you chose and why you chose it?
Yeah, so I chose excited. I just feel like this is a really great learning opportunity for us. This is fantastic that we're able to get this experience and hear some new things. And so I'm just excited to really dive in and set the stage for our meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, Josh. Khadijah, I noticed you wrote exhausted. Are you comfortable talking at all about your word? Just wanted to check in.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into it. It's kind of personal, going through some family kind of stuff, but I'm just really relieved to be here building out our capacity with all of you today. It really gives me something, I think, to occupy my mind and look forward to. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Do please let us know if there are any ways we can support you better today. And the word I chose is curious, because I'm really curious to see where you guys land on the feedback. So if we can move to slide 5 for the main event, just verbally let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
I'm there.
Okay, so I have synthesized all the comments you guys left in the agenda. Thank you so much again for doing the pre-work. And I found that there are about 8 main buckets of desired changes for tomorrow's training. So if you could please prioritize them on the spectrum below. Far left side is really low priority to you. Far right side is very high. This is super important. Do this silently, and then we'll have a short discussion to work out any misalignment. And just give me a verbal "I'm done" when you have put your priorities on the list, please, or on the spectrum. Thank you. And if there are no other questions, you have about 2 minutes to plot the comments. All right, great. I see action happening. Okay, more breaks in the afternoon. Okay, adding the ideation activity, great. Okay.
I think I'm done.
Done? How you doing, Josh? Do you need another minute or are you good?
I'm good as well.
Okay, great. So it looks like everyone is agreement on the positioning of all comments except the comment that says focus more on blogging best practices. Can anybody tell me their reasoning for their placement?
Yeah, so that was me. I saw that someone placed it as a high priority, but I think this activity is very similar to our social media strategy that we've done before. And we've agreed as a team that we're really looking to build new skills and break out of our old ruts. So I'd rather prioritize new activities and approaches beyond blogging.
Okay. So any other thoughts on that from the group?
Yeah, I definitely hear where you're coming from, Josh. And I think that I would be comfortable to change my placement. I do think that it can be deprioritized.
Oh,
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much, Khadija. All right, so we'll agree. I will delete that from the top part. I will work on fitting the top items into the agenda for tomorrow, especially this add ideation activity to inspire fun content, spend more time on Instagram content, and have more breaks in the afternoon. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
All right, so if you could move to the next slide, please, for next steps. And just verbally let me know when you're there, please.
I'm there.
I'm there.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So before we leave, I want to make sure we nail down some really concrete action items. I know that I'm responsible for making these last minute changes. Are there any other action items around the agenda that we want to assign?
Yeah, we talked about getting some music for the beginning of the session. I'd be happy to create a playlist and I can send it out to everyone.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much, Khadija. I will need that by 2 p.m. today. Is that a reasonable time frame for you?
Oh yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, so let me just write in your name here, 2 p.m. today, and then no other notes. Are there any other thoughts on next steps? And can I get a verbal response if yes? All right. So next slide, please. Slide 7. Just let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
I'm also there.
Okay, great. So there is only one more thing standing between you and lunch. I would be so grateful if you could take 2 minutes to fill out this feedback survey on how the session went and on my facilitation. Anything is fair game. I'm really eager to improve. So extra thank you for any constructive feedback you have. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. That was great. I'm really excited for the training tomorrow.
Oh, good.
I'm excited too. Thanks so much. Have a really good day, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye. And scene. Thank you. So the strategies that we touched on here, just very quickly, facilitator narration, visual activities, modeling, receiving feedback, democratizing participation, verbal communication and tech guidelines, an activity for tech onboarding and for human connection, and the contingency plan, which, let's see. Right, so the contingency plan here I have next to me, but it's a PDF of screenshots of every single page of that Google spreadsheet with builds that show the different, for example, the different activities on that spectrum being placed there. And so had we needed the contingency plan, I would have shared that screen instead of the Google Slides, and we would have done very similar stuff, except we would have pretended that they moved those kind of Post-it looking shapes instead of them actually moving it. All right.
Okay, great. So we're getting towards the end, and we're going to go over some Q&A for the last few minutes. But before that, we ask that you please take just a few moments to give us feedback on the webinar. We are constantly reviewing the content and trying to make it better for future webinars or future VISTAs. So please take a few moments to let us know how we could improve this presentation, and we certainly appreciate any feedback you can provide. And while you do that, so that there will be a link in the chat for those who wish to, and also as you close out, as you close out of Zoom, there ought to be a link that automatically opens for you to complete this, and we certainly appreciate it. But as you complete it, we'll also address some of the questions that came in. So looking through these, we'll have to go pretty quick with about 5 minutes left, but so here's Ryan. So here's one that came in that might be pretty quick. Do you have any sample ground rules for meetings? Now, I know in that demo you had a few, and Khadijah added one about having fun, and you mentioned err on the side of over communicating, but do you have any other just kind of sample ground rules that you might want to suggest?
Yeah, so I would think a lot about who is the group that you are working with. I think what is the group size? So something like, yes, perhaps not having verbal responses for everything, but could people please put in the chat, any sort of thing that might be narration. So for example, instead of saying, yes, I'm on slide 6, just, hey, can everybody put in the chat when they're on slide 6? That's an easy way for you to put in the ground rules, knowing whether or not people are following along with the work that you're doing. Other things like playing around with the feature on Zoom, like the hand raising feature, you can easily put that in. Things that you would normally do in a regular in-person meeting. So, hey, please show up, be present, let people finish what they're saying before you interrupt. Anything really, really translates.
Great. And kind of, somewhat similar note, but not necessarily. Any icebreaker ideas in a virtual setting? Do you have a go-to icebreaker maybe that you might suggest, or maybe a website that has a lot of good ideas for virtual icebreakers?
Yeah. Oh, I love this idea of using polls as an icebreaker for a large group. But my favorite icebreakers are always things that allow people to know each other in richer ways, and that allows you to use them for new groups as well as groups that already know each other. So one that I like is just having a collage intro. So you can do this on Google Slides, you can do this on digital whiteboards, but having everybody upload a photo of themselves, maybe a photo that represents where they're from, and then combining that with people bringing along an actual show and tell item that represents something. And then so this allows you to see people, what they look like, to see the different things that are meaningful to them and seeing them as full humans, and then bringing in the physical environment. Maybe it's, that represents where you live right now. And I always have like a big pine cone from a tree outside and kind of talk about that. That's really my favorite stuff, that allows people to be really human despite it being a virtual environment.
Great. And there are still some questions in there, and I'm sorry, but I know we're running a little late, so we'll have to go ahead and move on. We will try to address those in the Q&A, typing those in these last couple minutes, but want to respect everyone's time. So just an FYI on an upcoming webinar next month on August 26th, we'll have Starting Off Strong, Professional Workplace Success. So if you're interested in the topic, by all means, we would love to see you again next month. And we thank you all for attending today, and we certainly appreciate your service. Thank you for your VISTA service. This will conclude our presentation today, and you may now disconnect. Thank you so much.